I think what most people don't understand is that even the best designers, even the best teams out there go through many, many revisions. The Siri that the world saw, the one that we launched on Apple, was the 52nd version of Siri. When we launched Siri, I actually was, standing outside a line in New York to a restaurant, and a guy behind me basically said, "I love you, Siri. Will you marry me?" And really testing Siri on more of the fun, sort of emotional level. And that's something we just didn't expect, right? Like, we didn't expect the value to be like a friend, or this little boy who was autistic. Actually, there was an article written about him, how Siri was his best friend, right? We had no idea. So that's what I think people don't quite understand when it comes to vibe coding or even vibe designing, is that at the end of the day, it's really about building something that works.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mohammed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuri and Christina, for having me.
My first question, did you watch the recent update of design by Apple? And what are your thoughts on that?
My initial impression is it's fresh, it's different. It's adding a very tangible type of UI to computers. And maybe that's part of their new philosophy, which is that computers are no more this flat screen, that it's much more tactile. You can talk to it, you can touch it. Of course, I think it remains to be seen through the testing and the beta that they're releasing, how it's actually going to be used by real users. And it's actually something I spoke with my co-founder about, because my co-founder actually worked at Apple for many more years than I did during the time of Steve Jobs. And he said Apple has a way of setting the tone, but then observing how people are also responding. And I think Apple doesn't shy away from imposing its own taste, right? I remember having a conversation with a couple of Apple designers, and in the age of AI, there was a concern about whether we're losing taste, and that as humans we still have that. And I think Apple leans into that, and it's not afraid to try something new, especially when it comes to taste.
How you frame it, it's pretty logical what's happening now, because there are a lot of comments that Apple is losing AI game, that everybody's rushing, like Microsoft, Google, and Apple is not adopting as fast as others.
The speeds that we're seeing are unprecedented. We're seeing, new technologies pop up, every few days in some cases. And Apple's approach, in my experience, has been much more precise, much more slower, but careful, right? And about creating something that is truly amazing in terms of the user experience. And so when Apple innovates, right, we expect something that's delightful, that's beautiful. I think the question really comes down to, is this slower, more precise, careful approach going to either win, or at least going to coexist with the very fast speed of development? And especially when it comes to privacy, personalization, these are areas that require thinking, right? And going really fast on these two areas, we don't know. We don't know yet, right? Enterprises are still wary of AI because of the privacy aspects, right?
What's interesting is that you have experience launching products and features in two different types of companies, Google and Apple, because everybody knows that strategy for Google is like launching many products and see what sticks, the famous graveyard of apps. And you would say that maybe Apple never did something like that. They were very safe, but if they launched something, it's almost always a success.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Like for me, for many years, it was that Google almost doesn't innovate anymore. Too much, yes, because Google Workspace is pretty similar for many years. Gmail doesn't change so much, but with AI era, they started launching lots of tools for Gemini, video generation, music generation. And so they started playing this game again. So do you think that companies should now be more risk taking and just launch products, or like what strategies should they take? For example, if you're a medium-sized startup or if you are large enterprise.
My co-founder and I have been influenced by both the launch fast approach, like you have at Google, but also really crafting a great user experience. And we've seen success, out of both strategies. Launching fast for us is important because it's really about offering value every week to users, new value, right? And especially when you're working in a very difficult space, getting that AI accuracy up, increasing the number of integrations, deepening the value proposition, right, that you're offering with new use cases. That's really important to keep momentum, especially at the pace that the industry is going in. So launching fast is definitely our default culture. At the same time, we also love craft, right? We also love building products that delight us and that also drive business outcomes, right? The products that we remember are the products that Apple builds, right? Linear, Gamma, Granola, right? And there's a reason why they succeed because they, really provide that better user experience. It translates into delight and usage, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to do. So what we do is we try to pick very key topics. We call them big rocks. For example, stickiness is a big rock. And we really try to create a great offering for that. We can iterate very fast in terms of smaller features, but when it comes to delivering bigger bets, that's when I think we take more of an Apple-like approach.
When you have this internal testing, like it's also from our experience that you design something, you love the product. You show it to colleagues, they love the product. You do some user testing, you get some feedback that maybe something you learn, you change something. It's the typical situation, like when you start showing that outsiders. But then from your experience, you had tester program, and then you launch globally. Did you ever had some new findings because of the much larger audiences that start using the product?
Absolutely. In fact, I can share a story, about Siri where the initial version of Siri was really targeted around task completion for, finding a restaurant, making bookings at restaurants, booking a movie ticket, right? Making reminders, looking for the weather. And that is what we assumed our users were going to do. And so the initial ones did that because we also guided them, right? And they knew that they needed to test those use cases that are available. But when we launched Siri, I actually was, standing outside a line in New York to a restaurant, and a guy behind me basically said, "I love you, Siri," and started making all these really fun, "Will you marry me?" And really testing Siri on more of the fun sort of emotional level. And that's something we just didn't expect, right? Like we didn't expect the value to be like a friend or this little boy who was autistic. Actually, there was an article written about him, how Siri was his best friend, right? We had no idea. We didn't plan for that at all. We didn't design for that. But when your product scales, you find all of these really interesting edge cases that actually aren't really edge cases. They're actually, in some cases, the main, use case.
Yeah, let's continue about Siri. So you were with voice interfaces from the beginning, when for many people it was like science fiction. Now perhaps everybody understands, yes, that's possible. Lots of people tried it. But at least from my bubble, I still don't see that it's so widespread adoption like in science fiction movies. People still type. I see that there are some coders who use like vibe coding. They dictate text to the editors. But do you see interfaces will actually change, that most of our interaction with computer will be voice? Or adoption is so complex and voice interface has so many limitations that people will still prefer typing?
The short answer is that I think both will coexist. I think we're entering a multimodal world, and it's not just, between chat and voice. We're going to see AI show up in all types of new creative interfaces. The one we're working in, for example, is a visual canvas. So I think there's room for AI to be more visual and to work in that sort of space. And in other cases like Grammarly, for example, AI is more of a little nudge, right? It's a little message that pops up and that helps you write a better sentence, and it's more of an assistant. So I think the world we'll see is less of sort of web apps, native iPhone apps, and we'll sort of see this blend of multimodal interfaces across apps.
Yeah, and from my experience for business software, it's hard to have voice interfaces because people usually work in offices. There are a lot of other people, and if everybody starts talking to their computers, it would be like a call center, maybe.
Yes, although it could work in remote, right? It could work at home a little bit more.
Yeah, or we will need better APIs that can understand whispering or like signs and then work with us. Okay, so you position your application like Grammarly for design. You had different ways how to go with this. Like it could be like Grammarly, or it could be like SimilarWeb, for example. Yes, because one of the use cases, people install extension and get advice on how to improve their website, their product. Why did you decide to move into this little Grammarly type of approach and not building something like SimilarWeb, Ahrefs, or so you just do some competitive analysis of different similar UIs?
Yeah, it was a deliberate decision, and that is really based on a learning that I had, which is to meet users where they are. In today's world, you're asking users to come to a new application. Users are inundated with applications, right? There's millions of applications they can choose from, but there are certain workflows where they find their home. And when it came to design, it was really Figma, right? At least for user experience. So that is why we developed essentially a Grammarly type interface that's inside of Figma. So as you are working, it actually provides this very lightweight nudge that helps you to enhance the work that you are working on right at that moment, right? And we also had a vision, and that vision is developers have for many years been able to have an interface where they can code and they can test that code simultaneously, right? They can compile their code, but they can immediately switch to coding and addressing the bugs or issues that come from that compiler. Designers and product managers do not have that type of experience. That ability to switch between designing and testing is still very fragmented. I need to go from Figma to Dovetail, right, to another testing solution. And then I have to bring all that information back into Figma somehow, and it's all done very manually. So that is what really motivated us to choose the Grammarly type of experience. And I really love Grammarly because it's, it really just shows itself when you need it, when you're typing. So very similar philosophy. When you're designing, that is where we nudge you, and that is where you can apply a test to enhance your design.
When I go to the conferences, I ask how people approach design now, and I pretty often hear that their design team is now starting designing in Cursor or similar apps. So they're almost, that's the usual thing that they are skipping Figma altogether. Maybe because of the startups, like conferences are attended very often by startups. Or like, do you also feel this, that there is a trend that designer will move closer to the code and will, for many cases, especially for business software, will skip Figma at all?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early days of vibe coding and vibe designing. And the use case that designers told me is that, I have an idea, and it's just easier to vibe code it, right, to see how the interaction works. And that interaction it's not production level code, but the value is that I get to show my engineer and really have an intelligent conversation about how this works. And that gives me that feedback loop, right, back into my design process. Then I take my learnings and then I have to recreate it in Figma, because the source of truth, especially with my design system, is still in Figma. So I don't think we've really, truly seen how vibe coding and designing is going to end up.
I don't like vibe coding because it's actually lots of thinking and planning. If you say that it's just vibing, that means that it's like a play, but you still need to work hard to build something great with these tools. So my question is like, do you see the end game that our tools will be able to write tests for every design we do, and even maybe auto schedule interviews, maybe unmoderated tests for what we have, and just suggest, do you want to, like you did one day of work, do you want me to create unmoderated tests and get real feedback from users, and next morning you have the result and see what design works better or worse?
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting thing about vibe coding is that it allows us to work with very short feedback loops, right? We can work in a very scrappy way. We can build things quickly, test it, get that feedback, and do another version. I'm sure you can relate that getting the first draft is not the hard part. It's the iteration, right? How many times you have version 10, version 11, final, right? And so it's really about helping people get through that stage. And that's where I think the challenge is for design, because design has a very different characteristic to code. Code can compile. It has a right answer. You know when you got the right answer. It compiles. Design, you don't know when you have the right answer. It's much more ambiguous. And the promise, I think, of this, if you want to say sort of the design phase of the product development process, is how do you go from ambiguity to clarity super fast? And that's actually the problem that we're trying to solve. I think that's the part that's missing right now. But it's also really hard to do because you really have to understand context. And talking to users is very much part of that context. So I certainly don't suggest a world where you don't talk to users anymore, but users become one of the inputs, right? The other is your strategy document. The other are your analytics, right? Bringing all of that together in a way that is seamless and easy really allows me to have that fast feedback loop to go from ambiguity to clarity, which is really what design is all about.
So we already have some experience launching the product that people maybe didn't knew that they need. So that's a different type of project than everybody is begging for, because with AI we have this technology opportunity to provide new value. And from the strategy, from the process that you have, like, is it different from other products? Do you see different challenges? Because there are people who are actually looking for such tools, but I guess there are a very small amount of people who are actually going to Google to find AI for UX audit. Most people need to find it different.
I think what most people don't understand is that even the best designers, even the best teams out there go through many, many revisions. Just to give you an example, the Siri that the world saw, the one that we launched on Apple, was the 52nd version of Siri. The work of Siri actually started in the 1990s. Adam Chayer was a student of Douglas Engelbart, and they actually started building that first generation of assistants, right? And so over the course of, 20 years, they went through so many versions of Siri that the one that we finally launched, on the iPhone really used the knowledge, And so that's what I think people don't quite understand when it comes to vibe coding or even vibe designing, is that at the end of the day, it's really about building something that works with your users, right? And anyone who's interested in taking their app to that next level, to actually delight users, to increase engagement, to actually build a business, right, from their app, which means you got to convince users to go from free to paid. That's where we come in.
Mhm. The challenge with AI native products is that there are almost not enough inspiration to get from. Like for mobile applications, there are like sites like Moblin. You can go and see what are the patterns, how it should work, and you have to invent a lot of stuff. So, how do you approach this, and what is your advice for people who are also trying to build products that were impossible before AI era?
In the last decade or two, you could build a mobile app or a desktop, web app in your studio alone by yourself. You need a very small team, and you can still build something pretty decent. But in AI, I think what really separates someone in this very crowded space is to actually generate very high quality AI results. That's way beyond what you can get from baseline models like ChatGPT. And to do that, it really requires applying your AI with real data, right? With real customer data. So find customers that are willing to work with you, find those trusted testers and apply your AI to their data, offer them value, and use that refinement learning, right? Use that feedback. It really comes back to feedback loops. And I think feedback loops are even more important when it comes to AI because you can't get a feedback loop just being in your studio by yourself. You have to look at how the customer responds to the results, especially because we are dealing in a world that is non-deterministic. You never know what you're going to get. So the customer needs to see what they are getting and then can respond. And that allows you to then refine the prompt, to refine your agent or even the model if you're working on a model to really get to that next level. And you just go through that process 100 times. And by the end of it, you will get an AI product that really can deliver high quality results consistently across many customers.
So how much do you need to know about AI itself, like its capabilities, how it's built, how it works, and it's mostly using similar products and just trying, experimenting, or you actually need to understand everything below what people you see?
I think you can get really far just by working in the application layer and really understanding how to get the best quality results from AI, whether it's through a prompt, whether it's through providing it context. In our case, for example, we've created a database of user behavior and psychology principles, right? That we wrote ourselves and we spent months writing it. And the reason why is because that educated the AI, that essentially tuned it to give results that are biased towards those principles, right? And so it's really about learning how to prompt, but also to construct the context and the data that you provide with that prompt to then get the results that your customers are happy with. It does help to have a domain expert on your team. So, for example, we have a panel of design experts. And so I defer to those design experts to also tell me whether the results that we're producing is quality results, whether they would actually use it. And so having, you don't need to be in design. You could be in another field, whether it's education, law, health, but getting a domain expert on the panel as part of your team to review those responses will help you get that feedback loop. And then it's a matter of refining the prompt, refining the context, the different pieces of data, and really getting a great idea of how to work with the AI to generate high quality results.
Do you have a roadmap for your product? Can you share like the vision, like how do you see the product in a year, in a two?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working on, I mentioned those big rocks, the big bets, that we have. And one of those big bets is that, just like you said, Yuri, that, people are starting to build and design in other applications beyond Figma, right? Cursor, Lovable, a lot of code gen tools, V0. So our first big rock is to create a very seamless integration into these code-gen tools and allow not just developers, but anyone using it to be able to get an analysis on their live production app and to fix those UX issues, that are annoying, but also to actually give me more deeper, meaningful recommendations, like actual new features that can actually engage my audience better. So that's number one. And number two is around context. We have a vision of creating what we're calling a product memory, which is essentially a knowledge base of your company's product data. It could include user research, analytics, your design guidelines, even your PRD and strategy. Documents that tend to be very scattered all over the place, and it's really hard to access them in the moment that you're designing. And that's what our product memory system does. It aggregates all of that data and then through AI agents makes it accessible at the moment that you are designing. So it's a really hard problem to solve because, as I mentioned, design just has that characteristic of being very ambiguous and not having a right answer. And so we're going to see how we do, but that's the next big step for us.
I totally agree with the roadmap. It also says that I see the change that finally designers become interaction designers. Previously, like we always had the term interaction designer, but nobody used it actually because there's a UI designer, product designer, but it was really complex task to prototype everything for most projects, and people sometimes just stopped on the static screens. But now with all these AI tools, even inside of the Figma, you are actually starting designing interactions like full flows and seeing like all the imperfections or too many clicks, problems, etc. Like it's now first way to design. Like previously, it was the last step when you finish design, then you tried to test it and see maybe where can you improve it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We are almost done. I think like we can go to the rapid round questions. Thanks. That was very inspiring conversation, and a few more questions for you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. How do you explain to your mother what do you do for a living?
Wow, I think I've tried. So we're essentially creating a design partner for you that sits next to you, looks over your shoulder, and gives you suggestions to help guide you towards creating a better design for your customers.
What book on design or product management influenced your life, your career?
I'd have to say Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. So my co-founder and I love Pixar. I haven't seen a bad Pixar movie. I really don't know how they do it, delivering hit movie after hit movie. And so we were just super curious what goes on behind the scenes of Pixar, what methods they use, what tools they've built themselves, right? And so Creativity Inc. really opened my eyes on how to truly delight, how to tell stories, and how to just build great products.
What's some one thing that your job that keeps you excited for years to work on your product?
I think it's almost like being a private investigator where you're slowly unraveling this onion and discovering new layers and new, deeper use cases. When we first started, it was really just designers and helping them fix their UX issues. But as we dug deeper, we realized, actually, it's engineers or product managers that can also learn. And we can actually help them, build great features. So I think it's always this learning process of opening this onion, and it's like a never-ending onion that you're continually peeling and discovering.
If you could have a dinner party with an influencer from past or from current time, from present, who would be this person and why?
I have to say it's Naval Ravikant. Naval Ravikant, for me, has really provided a strong foundation of how to live your life, but also how to apply yourself in work. And it's really a, holistic philosophy on life, work, relationships. And yeah, I just love his stuff. I've read everything, and I would absolutely want to meet him if I could.
And the last question, what's the most valuable lesson you learned in your career?
I think if there's one, at least more recently, it's really about having self belief. And it's so important today, especially for founders, because there's just so much noise out there. There's going to be people that are going to tell you that you're going down the wrong path. There are people that are not going to understand you, right? They don't see the vision that you see. And so find a vision of the world that you want to live in and just go create it. Have that belief that that is a world that you can create, that should be created. Just like Steve Jobs says, everything around you has been created by someone no smarter than you. So find what it is that you think the world should be and just have that strong self-belief and go do it. And don't worry about the noise, around you.
That's very inspirational. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights. I really enjoyed the conversation. We discussed so many things, but I think that it helps a lot of people who are now working on AI-driven products to understand that this is a long journey. It's not like something you can vibe design or code idea like in a weekend.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great way to start, absolutely. But it's really, I think, how do you help them build a business out of it, right? How do you help them sell it to more users, grow it? I think that's the next wave of AI. And we're gonna see some pretty awesome companies, come out. And we want to be one of them.
Good luck with that. Thanks.
Thanks.